Okay, just a few more attendees joining. I'll give it 1 more minute, and then we'll start the presentation. Thank you. Okay, I think we're ready to start. Right, so what we're going to do, if you've got any questions throughout the presentation, you should be able to see on your GoToWebinar window a questions pane. So if you could just enter your question into there, and what I'll try and do is get to those questions at the end of the presentation. So as I say, throughout, if you want to write any questions, put them in there, and I'll do my best to answer them at the end. Okay. Right, so we'll start the presentation now. So hello and welcome to the Ask the Experts session we've got today. So we'll be focusing on virtualization and the effective software licensing within virtual environments today. I'm Adam Denyer-Hampton. I'm one of the pre-sales consultants here at SafeNet. So today we'll be focusing on virtualization and what it is and where we are at today. We'll also be looking at the history and evolution of virtualization, some of the drivers for actually going from a physical environment to a virtual platform, looking at the virtualization and software licensing landscape, pitfalls and traditional approaches, as well as some enhancements that we'll be looking to implement and use. We'll then round up with some key takeaways for ISVs, and then we'll also have a Q&A session at the end. Okay, so let's go back to the basics and let's have a little look at what virtualization actually is. Well, essentially, virtualization is the practice of creating a virtual version of a device, a machine, a resource, with all of these traditional resources, but running virtually and on a actual physical host. So lots and lots of virtual instances running on physical hosts. By using these virtual environments, the resources can actually be decoupled from the hardware. I think that's really key to understand, and it's this decoupling that allows companies, large and small, to actually be more agile. So what we'll do is I'll actually look at the benefits of this shortly, but first we'll actually go through some of the sort of virtualization and how that's actually evolved and to get to where we are today. So we can see from this slide the early stages of virtualization, or virtualization 1.0, around about 2005 time, was actually mainly server-based, so it's a server consolidation base, and this was essentially to allow the utilization of resources for distributed, efficient test and development environments, so basically saving for the test and dev environments that we see today. The second evolution, Virtualization 2.0, around about the 2008 mark, was actually seen where we saw virtualization of production machines, as well as the introduction of hypervisors from providers such as VMware. So 2013 and the virtualization era we're seeing today actually is now starting to really focus on things such as data virtualization, IT as a service, and infrastructure as a service, where as many company resources as possible are actually being virtualized. So if we take a little look at the types of virtualization in a bit more detail, we can see, there are quite a few there. We've got 5 or 6 there. And the list is actually in chronological order. So it's actually from where we started, which was server virtualization, going right the way through to the most recent, which is storage data virtualization. So we've got some statistics here from the IDC and IBM stat, and we can see today, currently, we have 2.7 zettabytes of data which exists in the digital universe, and we're actually expecting that to then increase quite substantially to around about 35 zettabytes of data in the year 2020. So we can see, based on all of these types of virtualization, we're actually seeing a sort of a new dimension of virtualization that's coming out of this, and this has arisen from challenges that IT teams and companies have around the world, looking at issues such as rising volume, costs, and complexity of storage, making having to make a lot of decisions on things such as what are we going to do about the storage architecture and the amount of data that's growing, how are we going to design this, what are the operations and performance issues we're going to face, and what we're seeing now is there's actually another step in the evolution of virtualization, which is actually moving more towards software-driven data centers. So due to massive data requirements, we're seeing that traditional data centers can no longer manage these data demands. So what's happened is we've actually gone away and we've moved towards this software-defined data centers that are effectively going to be that next step in the evolution of virtualization. Why are they so good? Basic reasons, really. Not only can you provide support for the legacy type of enterprise solutions that you have today, you can now also start to provide support for things such as the new cloud supporting for sort of cloud computing and services along those lines. And you can see pretty much from the diagram in front of you that on the left-hand side there was lots of physical attributes, but on the right-hand side you can see that it's pretty much possible to virtualize just about any aspect of a company's infrastructure. You've got virtualized server firewalls, you've got virtualized data centers, you've got virtualized switches. Everything can be virtualized. So we'll now look at the drivers for actually moving from physical platforms to virtual environments, and I've basically narrowed these down into 3 areas. There are a lot more, of course, but these are sort of the major issues or the major drivers for actually going into the virtual environment. So at the top, one of the greatest advantages has actually been the cost saving. So that you're saving costs due to operational costs, energy costs, reduction in the amount of hardware and real estate. All of these things are actually driving down the average costs. So going on average from physical to VM drives down from $300 to $100, which is quite a substantial saving. We're also seeing that advancements in technology, certainly nowadays we're seeing that you have the ability for virtual machine provisioning to actually take place in minutes. You can spin up a virtual machine instance or a server within minutes rather than weeks. There's no requirement to gather new hardware and the software that runs on those environments. There's also an increase in flexibility and reliability with virtual machines, which are key for drivers for moving from physical to virtual. In particular, things like having the ability to fulfill geographical requirements and geolocated systems, which are very hard to do if you're coupled with that hardware environment. The last sort of major booster for going virtual is it's so much easier to become more reliable. Much more robust and flexible foundation for high availability architectures, and the ability for failover in a disaster recovery scenario. And we can also see that the times for actually applying disaster recovery, such in the industry that we're in today, going from 5 to 1 minutes is a substantial improvement from where we were 5 or 6 years ago. So we've gone through virtualization in a little bit of depth. We've focused specifically on virtualization, where we've come from, where we're going to, where we aim to end up at, where we at least feel the industry will. And now we're really going to try and focus on the sort of virtualization and how that really shapes and is changing the licensing landscape today. So, I mean, the most common concern for a lot of companies that we're seeing at SafeNet is that traditional licensing methods are too restrictive. You know, trying to apply things such as physical dongles or software licenses, albeit will work, can have some pitfalls that we've seen today. And having that tie to a physical attribute is really sort of holding back the virtualization or even the purpose of to virtualize things. When we actually look at the virtual environments, we can see there's pretty much only 4 options that are available to you. The first is detect and deny, and this is where a virtual machine is detected by a software license, and it's then possible to set a policy as the ISV where you can say simply deny access to the application or run the application if the application is found to be running on a virtual machine. We then move a little bit further to the right, and we'll see that traditional licensing, such as using a physical dongle, basically fixing that physical dongle in a virtual environment where the option of protecting the application using a physical dongle can take place. It's going to more towards the innovative and flexibility. We've got fingerprinting, which is quite common today. And this reduces the costs of the hardware and the activation time, so it does lend itself to be more appropriate for virtual environments. It basically allows the software license to be bound to a fingerprint of physical or virtual attributes. And then the last, which is the cloud connected environment, is the most recent and advanced technology that we have today. And will effectively allow you to combat the issues with software virtualization. So what we'll do is we'll have a quick look at some of these points in a bit more detail and exactly why they're good and some of the pitfalls that we see with each of these. So we can see that the top one there, detect and deny, is certainly the easiest to maintain. It's very common today with some companies. And the ability to literally identify that it's running on a virtual machine and simply deny the software to run on that virtual machine is acceptable for some. However, as we've seen earlier with some of the statistics we've been through and some of the growth patterns that we're seeing, companies are embracing virtualization at an exponential rate. Simply denying the ability for an application to run on a virtual platform is it's getting to the point now where it's going to start to impact on the amount of revenue a company can make. So the second option, which is the most secure, as people would say, and the most traditional at least, is actually using a hardware dongle and binding the application to that hardware dongle. Unfortunately, there are some major pitfalls with using a physical dongle in a virtualized environment. Not all virtual platforms or providers actually support USB pass-through mode. That's where the physical dongle plugs into the host hardware, and then it gets mapped through to the virtual instance, and not all providers support that. Most hardware that's actually being used to host all of these virtual platforms don't have USB ports. I mean, if we look at data farms today and the way that we're seeing virtualization impact our industries, you just don't see USB ports available. They're just not built with them, not only for security reasons, but there's no need. Everything is now being virtualized. And if there's a live migration of a virtual machine as well, so between different hardwares, or even if the machine is just literally being moved to slightly different resources, then what happens is the USB mapping from the physical host to the virtual machine instance is actually lost, and you have to remap that physical dongle, and effectively that's a manual process. So again, there's downtime in terms of application use. So the most common method for embracing virtualization. That the majority of our customers and the customers that use licensing is actually the fingerprinting software licensing method, and this probably hits around about 80% to 90% of the requirements that a lot of ISVs have for providing licensing in virtual environments, but it's not quite 100% effective. So you've got some bonuses. You don't have any of the physical issues you have with the hardware dongle. You don't have to just deny a virtual machine. There is an option for licensing. You can automate these processes of licensing, such as electronic delivery, so activation portals, the ability to instantaneously provide a license to your customers. We have greater license flexibility with software licensing and fingerprinting, in that you can do things such as license detaching and roaming for individual licenses. However, that sort of 10 to 20% that we're looking at that's causing some issues for customers can be things such as it's the lock-in criteria. So it's a very hard one to balance up. What do I use? What do I use for lock-in criteria in a virtual environment? If you're too strict on what you lock to, then effectively you'll deny legitimate users access to an application. The pitfalls of that are, that's very negative. People feel your application doesn't work properly. You get a very bad reputation because the licensing isn't working the way in which it should. The flip side of that is if you make it locking criteria very easy and you lock to only one thing, such as the UUID, for example, then people can get around the licensing and actually copy that virtual machine multiple times. So you've got that. Not being strict enough leaves the licensing spoofing possible. So SafeNet are actually looking to combat that last sort of 10 to 20% that we're seeing, and we're going to use something along the lines of, it's called VM Live Migration, which we're looking to implement early next year, and effectively it's designed to combat these pitfalls that we've just gone through, and it basically gets rid of the false positives that we see. So if there is a legitimate need for, say, live migration, then this newer technology will combat this. So we covered off the traditional solution, so binding to physical dongle or using a fingerprint for licensing, and now we're going to look at something, the sort of next generation of software licensing, and certainly how SafeNet feel licensing is moving today. Essentially, there's one major difference from what we see with traditional licensing, and this one difference, if you will, actually prevents the pitfalls that we're seeing today with the hardware, the detect and deny, and fingerprinting, and that is effectively to move the license manager out of the local client infrastructure and move that to a secure cloud location. So you're basically taking the policing of the licensing from the internal network and you're moving that to a cloud infrastructure. I mean, we're really lending ourselves to the way of the software licensing in the cloud because of the rapid growth of virtualization. We're actually seeing rapid connectivity. So what we see in connectivity of companies globally, we're seeing that connectivity is required for reliability, redundancy, multi-geolocated resources, increased availability. All of these things are requiring connectivity to be coupled with virtualization, and effectively you'll get this with cloud licensing. I think it's key to sort of look at what the misconceptions are with cloud licensing. A lot of the people that SafeNet speak to see cloud licensing is often associated with being just a pure play cloud application, so applications that reside purely in the cloud, but that's definitely not the case, and it's actually the ability to provide cloud-based license managers for on-premise applications. So it's simply where the license resides. It's not to do with where the application resides at all. So if we look now at the actual SafeNet offering, so the Sentinel Cloud Connect licensing, as we said earlier, we're actually placing the licenses and the license manager outside of the end user's network to ensure that there's no duplication. I mean, if you're controlling where the license is, you're controlling where the license manager actually resides. then you as the ISV have ultimate control over the licensing. There's no need to worry about license copying. So the Cloud Connect license, and another key difference is that in previous times, because the license is actually implemented internally, what you'll have is you'll have the requirement to lock to something, some attribute to prevent that license from being copied. With a Cloud Connect license, you're actually more worried about the user. Okay, what's the user doing? How is the user using the application? And effectively, this basically removes any of the coupling with hardware. So you're not worried about the actual fingerprinting of the hardware anymore, because the license resides in a secure location. You're worried about how the user's using the service rather than the license. And this can be done to give full control over standalone and concurrent licensing. So if we look at how this actually works in the real world, with our customers today, then essentially what happens is the license or the application itself requests a license from the cloud server, and depending on the concurrency pool, is then allowed to consume a license for a predefined period of time, completely customizable by the ISV. So the end user authorizes, they then take the license for a predefined period of time. When the period of time is actually exhausted and the end user has used up all of their time, they can either re-request the license, or the license is then automatically reclaimed by the cloud server license. So you can see in the image here, there's a pool of licenses. We've got 3 machines, and that license can then be detached by any of those machines, and they can be served locally. Key thing again, most people think, oh, do I have to be connected to the internet all the time to acquire a license, to run the license? Not really. The application is never required to be online during, it's not really required to be online during the usage of a license, but merely just during the license request itself. So you just have to have a connection, can have a license, yes, no. I mean, on the face of it, that's the benefit, that's the ultimate benefit, the fact that you can combat all of those virtualization issues with the fingerprinting and the live migration and where's the license residing using this cloud-based licensing, but and basically giving you the flexibility and security that you would get with fingerprinting and physical dongles. But what we're actually doing is we're actually giving a little bit more than just solving the virtualization problem. So you can see here there's 6 things as an additional benefit of cloud licensing. So not only are we fixing the issue with virtualization, providing an answer to all the pitfalls that we've seen, we're actually giving the ability to have extra functionality. So some of those things are being able to offer more licensing models. So with traditional licensing, it's on or off, it's concurrent, it's time-based. But with cloud-based licensing, you can actually offer usage-based. So someone could do prepaid usage, or they could do a post-paid usage model where you pay for what you actually use. You can get detailed billing and end customer insight. How was the application being used? Not just who has the application, but what exactly they're doing within the application itself. As the license is now hosted outside of the network, as I said earlier, in a secure cloud location, then basically you can offer true user-centric follow-me licensing. So wherever the application is being run, let's have a look at how that application is being used and the licensing for that. If you want to maintain the status quo, so for a lot of larger customers and smaller and even medium-sized customers, you'll want to maintain the status quo with customers, but also be able to deliver a cloud-based license for, say, those virtualized environments that are causing some issue. And to be able to do that with the same back office, I think is pretty much key. And for all of these, I think the key and the last point here for licensing is the fact that we start having a different understanding of licensing. What are we actually doing? Well, we're not selling a license to a customer, we're selling a service now. You have the ability to purchase a service rather than just a license. So we'll just look at a few more details about the usage about the new type of cloud licensing and what you've got. Well, if we look at each of the additional benefits of cloud licensing, we can see that it doesn't only just benefit the ISV, but the end user itself or themselves have a great need and want to utilize this also. So with the pay-as-you-grow licensing model, it is possible to actually capture information on the types of usage metrics such as number of transactions, the time, how long something's being used, a certain amount of data that's been used, or processing time. And effectively the benefit of this is that an ISV is then able to charge more or less depending on actual software usage. So, people aren't overusing the software, they're being kept in compliance and they're being given the ability to use the service or upscale and downscale as and when they need to. And the end user will actually be paying for what they use rather than, the expected usage. We expect you to use 1,000, when in actual fact for the month of January through to July, you might use 1,100, and then for the rest of the year only 800, and you're actually paying for what you actually use. You get greater insight into how the application is actually being used. So not only can you understand for billing and usage purposes for the customer, but you can also then use that knowledge and push that back into the application, push it back into developing the application in a better way. You've also got the compliancy can be easily achieved. The usage data is accurate. It's billing data that's accurate, so there's no discrepancies there. And the ability to actually, in conjunction with an analytics tool, upsell an application, offer understanding into market trends from the license usaging itself. So the ISV and for the customer, the headache exists because of virtual environments is no longer an issue, as the application can be deployed in virtual environments without restriction on license abuse. So it can be pushed into those environments, in those virtual environments, and we're not getting any problems anymore because the licensing can reside outside of that network. One of the last points really here is the user-centric licensing, and I think this is really probably the key for fixing the virtualization problem. We're no longer worried about those physical attributes. Can we make sure that they don't copy the license because the fingerprint has to be perfect, and we're using a physical dongle but we're losing the mapping, and all these little issues that are causing some headaches for customers. Because we're now following the user, we have the ultimate freedom from no locking. The ultimate freedom is the fact that we don't have to lock to any specific hardware and environment anymore. And whilst allowing the application to run this way, effectively what you'll get is a number of new environments that you can start pushing into. And it might not be viable for every customer, and it might not be viable for everybody, but you now have the ability to push into virtual data centers, tablets, mobiles. You can change the way in which the client-server relationship now occurs because of these different ways of licensing. And we're actually seeing this a lot more with our customers. There's been a great uptake in the cloud licensing solution because of this. We can maintain the status quo with their existing customers, but also start offering the ability to scale, with this user-based licensing. Looking at things such as number of subscribers, or using the licensing to track the amount of data being used in an application. There's lots and lots of different things you can use this sort of licensing for. As I said, we've got that common back office, so you can now manage on-premise, cloud-based applications and cloud-based licensing if need be, and the workflow that you have for existing customers doesn't have to change. It's simply just offering a license that's now available in the cloud. Ultimately, one of the benefits, not just the virtualization benefits, is for the fact that customers now firmly retain the license, or the ISV, firmly retains the license. And at any point, an ISV can revoke, pause, renew, or update without requiring the customer to comply with these options. And all of this is actually happening behind the scenes. So, things like the license is now being consumed at a greater rate, or they're not consuming as much. All of this is happening behind the scenes, and it's up to the ISV about the amount of control their end customer has. So what do you want to show them? Do you want to show them usage? Would you like to give them a greater insight? Or would you just like them to have the service running and then bill quarterly, or whatever the requirement would be there? So I think there are some key takeaways for everybody here. We're coming towards the end of the presentation, and before we finish, I think it's really key to understand that, globally we are seeing companies and industries looking to leverage the benefits of virtualization. It's been a bit slower than we thought it would be, but still a lot of companies are now pushing forward into the virtual platforms. And we have to sort of roll with that, and we have to really go with the way the licensing works for these virtual environments. In itself, what does that mean? What's the impact? Well, effectively, it affects how you sell, how you price, how you license, how the application is consumed, what we're doing with that application. And we really have to sort of move with this and really embrace what we're doing. So SafeNet's offering of next generation cloud licensing, along with the VM migration plans for still using the on-premise licensing, is our way of looking to embrace virtualization and to really provide real tangible benefits to ISVs without the need to forfeit any of the license security or the flexibility that you have with traditional on-premise licensing. Okay, so I've come to the end of the presentation. If you do have any questions, I'm going to go to the chat window now and have a quick look. So bear with me 1 second. Okay. 1 second. Let's take that out there. Okay. Will new technologies, cloud-based licensing, VM live migration work with RMS? So effectively, RMS is, for everyone on the call, RMS is an enforcement technology. So what do we mean by that? It's a software license system that does actually implementation of licensing. What we're offering with cloud licensing and RMS is the ability to provide the ability to actually issue an RMS license and a cloud license from the same back office. That's our end goal. So we're really looking to provide that ability to issue a license. So the enforcement technology might be slightly different, the RMS or the cloud license, but effectively we're looking to change the back office, the way the back office works, so that the enforcement technology can work slightly differently. More details will be coming out about the VM live migration and exactly how we intend on doing that. We're still a little bit of a high level look at the licensing and the cloud-based licensing. Okay, are the slides available? Yes, the slides will be available along with this video, so you can refer back to anything that we've gone through today. And if there's any discrepancies, then please feel free to contact SafeNet. When is cloud licensing available after VM migration? Not quite sure on what we mean by that. Cloud licensing, I guess, well, I'll answer it how I think you're asking the question. So cloud licensing is actually available today. It's been available for the last 2 or 3 years. What we're finding is that we are, really focusing on the cloud license for on-premise application, as we want to offer that step, especially with the use of virtualization today. We can do the cloud licensing, as we speak. The VM migration is actually coming early next year, so there'll be more details coming out about that soon. What is the difference between Sentinel Cloud and the technology used by antivirus software? I don't know. Let's have a look. Sentinel Cloud and the technology used by antivirus software. Well, it depends on what you mean by the antivirus software. Sentinel Cloud, really, the Sentinel Cloud licensing, I can just give you a bit more of an insight into that, is it's technology that allows you to do usage tracking. So, you know, we're not just saying, okay, here's an application, here's a license, go away and use the license. Come back to me in a year and we'll renew that license. You get no insight, you get no understanding of how that application works. What we're doing with cloud-based licensing is we're giving the ability to not only track how the application is being used, but combat those issues, as we said, with virtualization, combat the issues where, you know, users want to roam easily and they want that license to travel with them, rather than it being a static issue. I hope I answered the question. If not, please state again. When does the cloud licensing become available? As I said, cloud licensing is available today. You know, if you want to go ahead and speak to someone at SafeNet about looking into that and how that works, by all means, please go ahead and do that. You know, we can set something up for you there. Our customers have no access to the internet for their reasons. What are our options here? I think this is always going to be the case where there's going to be some, normally for government or security reasons, high level of security, there's not going to be access to an internet. In that option, then what we tend to do is you'll have to stay with the fingerprinting technology, and you know, really start to utilize the live migration stuff that would come in. But what I think our key thing we're trying to set here is that there may be some customers that have to stick to that for you know, security reasons or other reasons, but there may be a large portion of your other customers that can have the internet or have a license sitting in the cloud. Now, the bonus of that is that from one operational back office, what do we get? We have the ability to issue the old style licenses for those customers that simply will not change because they can't, but have the same ability to follow the same process and issue a cloud-based license for those customers that can. You know, and your end customers or the end customers themselves will see the benefit of this. Yeah, the presentation will be made available for anyone. Okay, any solution for aerospace customers whose machines are not allowed to connect to the internet? I think, as I say, we've covered that before. I think, you know, if all of your customers aren't going to be able to connect to the internet or have the ability to connect to an internet, then really, you know, you're looking at just advancing and looking at the advancements in the fingerprinting technology that we're going to be implementing. The cloud licensing, it's not all about having constant internet connection, but there has to be at least an instance or an instance of connecting to the internet to gather the license. I mean, and this can be through a secure tunneling mechanism. It can be through an extremely secured whitelisted connection, but nevertheless, there still needs to be some sort of connection. Okay. How fast is license claimed from the cloud if a lot of features are claimed? So without going into too much detail about this, we can actually, you can claim the licenses in bulk. So you can say, okay, I want to claim 100 at once, and that can be done in one transaction. Or you can contain or request individual licenses or features, if you will, from the cloud. So it's depending on how you want to almost slice it and dice it, really. It's, do I want a couple of licenses or do I want a lot of licenses? Either way, you can request them less than a second. You know, it's not long. It depends on lots of things. You know, there's things, how many requests are currently going through to the system. If there's 1 million requests, then, you know, there might be a bit of a concurrency lag. How fast is the bandwidth? Are there a lot of firewalls or network routers to traverse? You know, how quick is the internet access route? There's lots of questions there that can slow down the transaction speed. But certainly, you know, it shouldn't be anything noticeable to the end customer. We will use the RMS development kit. Will cloud licensing be part of that? I believe that it won't, but I'm not 100% sure. The RMS licensing, you know, we have to sort of look at the the PM's roadmap for that. So our product management team, the roadmap is evolving all the time. I think at the moment that it isn't. The actual enforcement piece isn't looking to be, the RMS piece isn't looking to be cloud-based. But I think, if you've got further questions around that, I can clarify that a bit more. You can either speak to your account manager if you have one, or you can contact us directly, and someone will be able to fill you in directly from our product management team. Will we have to purchase a specific license from SafeNet for cloud licensing? So it's something that is an extension of what you currently have, cloud licensing. So it is an addition, but again, it was something that we can discuss a little bit more once we get off the call. If you want to go down the route of offering a cloud license to fix these issues, then it's something we can discuss in a bit more detail off the call. What have been customer reactions to this? It might be considered invasive. It's a fair point. It's actually what we get from a lot of our customers. We're going to get pushback from our customers. They think we're snooping on us. They think that we're watching what we're doing. It's the Big Brother complex, and all of these sorts of questions, which are very, very legitimate. I think my policy has always been open and honest. What are we collecting? Anonymous data about how the application is being used. You can decide as the ISV how complex or how non-complex, if you will, the license usage and tracking will be. So you can go down to the point where you can say, I would like to know if user Joe Blog has collected X, Y, and Z, or clicked on what or done what. Or you can keep it higher level where you can say company A, for example, has used 1,000 licenses. Now, I think it's that open and honest discussion that you have with customers. It's that open and honest approach where you say we're going to be collecting usage data on what you're using, but it's not things, it's just on that application, and it's nothing personable, and it's nothing, we're not collecting, if you don't want to, who's used what exactly, just that you have consumed a number of licenses. What is the cost model for ISVs who use cloud-based licensing? Very, very good question. Unfortunately, I'm quite technical, so I'd have to refer you to one of the sales guys who can fill you in with a lot more detail about cost models and cloud-based licensing and that sort of thing. I believe everybody has my details, or they'll have at least a way of contacting me after the call. If you don't have a current account manager with SafeNet, then please, you can contact me directly, and I can put you into contact with someone that can help you with the costing side of things. Our customers have intermittent connection in internet. Can cloud and RMS be used together? There isn't any reason why you couldn't use cloud and RMS together. It really comes down to code logic. If we're looking at things, you can test to see if an internet connection is available, acquire a license from there, and if the internet connection isn't available, then use an RMS license. But I think you could go ahead and just use the cloud license. So, people can actually detach a license from the cloud for a period of time. So they go in, they request a license, they say, hey, I want a license for 60 days, and they go ahead and connect that license. And then what you can do, if there is an intermittent internet connection, is actually refresh that license count. So when you get to the last 10 days, in those last 10 days, if you want that to happen, automatically renew me for another 60 days. So at some point in those 10 days, if an internet connection is established, they can automatically renew the licensing if they're allowed to do so. So you could use RMS and cloud in the same environment. I think you could probably combat most questions if there is at least an individual internet connection at some point to actually say, well, cloud could look after both on-premise and through the intermittent internet connection. Okay, what have we got here? RMS be used to maintain counters whilst internet is unavailable. So yeah, I mean, as I say, you can. The license is actually being downloaded to the local machine for a given period of time, and then they can go ahead and utilize offline the licensing capabilities. So, I mean, you could effectively, as I say, use RMS and cloud, but I think you could counter both, or you could combat both using just cloud. Okay, so if we use cloud and RMS for real machines and cloud for virtual, do we have to pay for 2 licensing systems? At the moment, I believe they are 2 licensing systems for RMS and for cloud. Again, this is more of a commercial discussion. So if you're an RMS customer already, you should have your own account manager. I would definitely speak to them about what can be done. We don't want to restrict anyone, and our end game is to have one back office that works with RMS, it works with cloud, it works with our other enforcement technologies, so that basically you can just have one back office and you can issue whatever type of license you want. Do we need to consider hardware to host cloud licensing? So the actual cloud license server itself is actually hosted in, we host it for you in the Amazon Web Services, or using Amazon Web Services. So the actual cloud license manager itself is actually hosted for you, and you then log into the system and you can then issue a license that way. We also have an on-premise back office which utilizes the cloud licensing for you as well, so you can have it on-premise or in the cloud, the actual back office piece. The license manager is again hosted for you, so we'll host the license manager for you, and then we'll provide you with the technology and security tunneling for the client to connect from the local environment to that cloud. So we look after all of the actual hardware for hosting cloud licensing. If you mean the actual client side of things, do you need to consider hardware to host a cloud license, as in the actual where the client actually has the license? No. It just has to be a compatible operating system, which is most of them, unless you've got some obscure, Linux platform that or Unix distribution that we've not heard of. Then essentially any platform you can think of, we can host or you can have a cloud licensing running on it for your clients. Okay, I've just come to the bottom of the list, so that's kind of good. We'll give it 1 more minute if there's any other questions at all. Don't think it seems there's any more. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time today. Really appreciate it. I hope it's been useful. I hope we've really sort of looked at ways we can actually combat that virtualization issue and the licensing landscape that is evolving. If you do have any more questions, please feel free to contact SafeNet. You can contact myself, or you can contact any member of the SafeNet team, and we'll be able to put you through to the right person, depending on your requirements. Thank you very much for your time today, everybody. Have a great day. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.